Hello, welcome. You guys enjoying PuppetConf so far? I hope so. Woo. Yeah. So there's this piece of software that may have just escaped. It's called Puppet 3. If you haven't checked it out yet, you probably should. So.
We're wasting our time here.
Yeah. So I'm Mike Stahnke. I run the delivery organization inside of engineering at Puppet Labs. Delivery was just another name that means release and QA, packaging, software testing, continuous delivery, CI stuff. That's what I do. This is me. That's my headshot. Isn't that nice? I was one of the people that started EPEL. So there were 6 of us back in 2006 that started talking about, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if RHEL had all these packages that we actually want to use? And so that's kind of where I got all my packaging background. So when I talk about packaging, I guess hopefully that establishes some type of credibility. I wrote a book on SSH a few years ago. Please buy it. Love royalties. Don't read it. It's horrible. We're going to talk about a balancing act today. It's configuration management or packaging. And I'm going to start with an or. We may end with an and we'll figure it out. I've not given this talk before either, so we'll see how that goes. So, find the balance between packaging and configuration management. We're basically going to take a dive on one side, see what's right and wrong with it, take a dive on the other side, see what's right and wrong with it. I'm in a unique position where I do the packaging at a configuration management company, so there's some knowledge there, I guess, or some counter effects in certain cases. As a sidebar, a couple of thoughts that we're going to come back to later are you confident in your backups? And seriously, raise your hand if you're confident in your backups. Okay. Are you sure about your DR plan? Do you have a DR plan? How many people are confident in their DR plan? That's less than backups, okay. And what's the goal of automation is more or less rhetorical right now. So, when I was getting ready for this talk, I kind of talked to a few of my friends, and of course there may have been beer involved, and we were talking about what do good system administrators do, and it was, a fill-in-the-blank option. And we really started with packaging. Good sysadmins know how to deploy software. That's their job. And so you can manage systems end-to-end with packaging. Red Hat tried to do this for years with their Red Hat Network product, and they were like, packages can do all of this stuff. And for the most part, they're not wrong. The advantages of packaging are simple. I can query things and find out is software installed. I can do dependency management. I can upgrade things. And yes, all these pictures, all of this is pictures of me writing on a whiteboard. I don't do slides. So, advantages of packaging are I don't have to have a compiler everywhere. I consider this a big advantage. There are other people that consider this a big disadvantage. I never want a compiler on a system that I'm going to expose any type of risk to. Some people are like, well, you're still going to have things like Ruby there or Python where you can still do all sorts of scary things without a compiler, and they're right, but I'd still prefer to reduce surface area if I can. The other advantage of packaging is reuse, right? I can take one package, I can install it on n systems where n's a positive integer greater than 1, and I have saved myself some type of effort. I don't have to make install every type of software package. Oh, now I has a sad. Seriously, last time I looked at these slides like a week ago. It's been hectic planning for this conference. The upsides of packaging, excellent dependency management. I know we talked about that, that's why you want a package, but packaging does dependency management better than almost every other type of way to get bits on disk. It also means you have intimate knowledge of your system. If you're capable of building a package for your system, you understand how it works, you understand the thought process behind how it's supposed to work, you understand the trade-offs that your distribution or your operating system is attempting to make for you. When I package for Debian, I have to think about things differently than when I package for a Red Hat-based system. Debian's going to try and start the service automatically and then shoot you in the head. Red Hat is not going to start the service automatically, so I have to figure out how am I going to get that service started. That's a pro and a con depending on what situation you're in. And of course, you can violate those policies and do it your own way if you want to, but there are, again, trade-offs for doing those things. The other thing is I don't need new packaging tools, or I don't need new tools on the system. If I want to consume packages, I have Yum. I have apt. It's a tool that's guaranteed to be there in the distribution. So if I want to do things, I don't have to, figure out, well, what's my application stack going to look like that manages, my system. I really don't want apps to manage my system. I want my system to be my system to serve out apps to make me money. That's why I want a system. I don't want a system just for the sake of having it. Other advantages of packaging, because you have simple tools like Yum or apt, deployments are simple. Almost always. You can get into some weird things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But another thing that I really like about packages is I can diff across systems. So if I list every package that's sitting on one box, I can list every package sitting on another and see what's changed. Well, this one got a new kernel, or this one got a new glibc, or this one, I don't know what the heck happened because I let somebody have root on it. And configurations are clearly versioned if configurations are all delivered as packages. So you get into a point where everything's a package, and then you start packaging your packaging materials, and you start packaging up your post scripts, and they grow legs. Packages are really great until they're not. So the downsides of packaging are quickly felt. Your postscripts is where everybody goes wrong first. You're like, well, all I have to do is get these bits out on disk, and then I'm going to start a service, add a user, talk to LDAP, configure this, and the people that are the worst at this are normally enterprise software vendors. They always get these RFPs that say, we want things in native packages, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go with some company, we'll call it, I don't know, IBM. And you look at their native packages, and the first thing I usually do is I run an rpm-q-scripts, because I want to see what are you actually doing. And 90% of the time, they're not actually performing an install in the RPM, it's everything's in a postscript. They basically wrapped make install in post. And that happens a lot with IBM software, it happens a lot with CA or BMC or any of these. And there are other places that are guilty of it. There are reasons to do things that way. None of them are good. So, and this is what happens when people start abusing pre's and posts. And the other thing is, you start making assumptions when you do things in pre's and posts. Like, I don't actually want to query the files that are in this package because the package manager doesn't know about them because they were created in a phase that was post-transaction of package. So, packages that are well made have a lot of advantages. Packages quickly become, can easily become less well made. You make unknown assumptions, you get upgrade pain. If you're doing everything in post, I have to figure out what was the state you were in before I do the thing that I want you to be in. Packaging has another downside. It is expensive. It is difficult. It is very difficult to do well. You have to learn tool chains. You have to read packaging guidelines. You have to figure out how does this actually work on this version of this operating system versus this. RPM changes how GPG is signed. Debs change their entire build tool chain, I swear, every 2 years. You have to learn those things and figure out that. And that's expensive. That takes a lot of time. And then it's also expensive. You need hardware for building or your laptops, and you figure out, does it work on my laptop, and then do I put it in production? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, so right now at Puppet Labs, we have 2 guys who package full-time, and they work for me, and I jump in and help all the time. So that's 3 people at Puppet Labs at a company of 100 that do nothing but package. And we're good at it. Like, we're damn good at it. And that's still 3% of my entire headcount is going toward packaging. So it's expensive. And then if you're doing configuration management through packaging, like, I'm going to have a postscript that sets up my users or turns on my service or make sure that this file has this entry in it and then it does this. You might have different packages in dev than you do in QA, than you do in staging, and then you do in prod. Because the staging package has the resolvers to go against the private network, but the prod package has the public network. And now it's 2 different packages. How do I test that well? My staging and my prod environments are now not the same. This is a big downside when you try and embed configuration in packages. Obviously, that's why I'm here to tell you how much I love Puppet. So, Also, when you get into a point where you think, well, I'm just going to make my own packages and I'll include my config file the way I want it. I'm going to package Apache with my HTTP.conf. I'm going to package MySQL with the my.conf the way that we need it set up for our clusters, which is really awesome for a little while. And then you realize that there's an upgrade out to MySQL, and it clobbers what I just did. Or, well, I can no longer point at a public mirror. Or I have to figure out how I curate each package, and I have to trace dependencies all the way down because I need to graph the repo to see if I have the right dependencies for the next version of this package. And this happens on any platform. No matter how stable they say they are, eventually they will be adding and removing packages. Dependencies will change. Sub-packages will get swapped out. And so when you can't reuse distro packaging, that expense of both cost and time and effort and swear words, just all goes up. And it's because you've been trying to do things in packaging that are very, very difficult. And I'm not done talking about downsides of packaging. Conflicts. This is another one where I can't have two packages manage the same file. They will complain. You can do it in posts. I can do seds, but then one package says that it's not pristine anymore, or it conflicts. When you try and upgrade, in certain cases, which after you force or no depths, or, if you start doing that, please feel bad. But if you do, you can see things start to be a problem where, and I work with Ruby packaging a lot, so, and I can tell you like 55 ways why I hate Ruby and Ruby packaging, but when you have 1.8 and 1.9 on the same system trying to do something, who owns user bin Ruby? Yeah. Well, fuck, I don't know. So you have to figure out which one's the preferred, which one's not the preferred. And then you have to have a package, and this one's got a weird name. Now it's Ruby 1.9, or maybe the old one's Ruby 1.8, and you have to start setting out shebang files and everything like that, and it just doesn't go well. Even if you're not conflicting on a package level, on a side-by-side installation level, you can have weird issues. And with the post scripts, you end up writing what we call idempotency, which is what Puppet's based on. And that's, you can just keep running the same thing and get the same results. It's kind of a math problem thing too. But and so you end up trying to detect state, fix state, put it in this, or detect state, figure out if you're in the state you want it to be in, and if not, change it. And that becomes complex logic in a lot of ways. And it turns out there are tools that have invested tons and tons of time and engineering effort in this, like Puppet. And then the other thing is multiple platforms are expensive. At Puppet Labs, we test on 22 different operating systems for every release of Puppet Enterprise. That means I have to know how to package on Debian what's different on Ubuntu. There are a few things. On RHEL, on CentOS, on Scientific, those are all actually very, very, very similar, luckily. We use the same packages. And then Solaris 10, and then Solaris 11, because they're not at all the same. And then, Windows different versions, and, we've been working on AIX heavily internally lately. There's just different ways to package things, and that expense goes way up. Even though it's the same piece of software, I have to understand how to package on all of those different things. Again, there are tools that can solve this problem differently. Okay, this is just making me angry. Okay, so we're going to sit back and reconsider the problem for a second. All right, so enter configuration management. Let's say I'm going to do everything with configuration management. I hate packages. I've just given you 5 pages of why packaging sucks. CM upsides are rich dependency tracking. I really like dependency tracking in packaging. Having hard depths that I can trace through, and I can graph it and say, I need this. If I want this package, I have to go grab all of these other packages, and there are little helper utilities to go do that for you and things like that. In configuration management, I can get away from it's just packages. I can have a package depend on this weird file sitting out over here, or this service being started, or other types of resources, which means I can start thinking about something collectively instead of in terms of only a package. You're also centrally managed, more or less, if you're doing configuration management. You have a central place that you're storing your configurations. And so you have this idea that you're versioning in a central place that you can deploy out. And that even if you're running your configuration management in a local type mode, like Puppet Apply, you're okay because you have a centrally managed, like somehow you're getting those manifests out to the system, so it's central. With packaging, I would find that you'd have, well, this package belongs on this DMZ, and this package belongs on that DMZ, and then I have to figure out, well, which one am I supposed to, I don't know. To me, CM seems way more centralized than packaging does in a lot of ways, and that's probably a point we could argue. Yeah, so I can start resource grouping into logical units instead of just packaging. I could do a package group thing and say, well, this is all of the web cluster, and I could, you know, make my own meta package that pulls in everything else. And sometimes I do things like that. But at a CM level, I can just say I'm going to include the web class, and then it all happens. You can also get reporting of change. There are some tools that can investigate your logs, but it'll tell you this package used to be there, and now it isn't. Or it wasn't there, and now it is. I can get a little more granular than that with my configuration management. Well, it ran at this time. Obviously, all logs have timestamps, or they're really, really horrible logs. But it ran here. It was in this state. We put it in this state. We checked it against this. We checked to see if there was a later version. There was or there wasn't. You know, we tried to trigger a resource refresh because of another action. So you just get more reports and more details on what's really going on in your system. One of the downsides of CM is if you actually can't model it in the CM very well, you end up execing. And in exec, you can't really inspect in our model at all. And by our model, I don't mean just puppets, I mean like in configuration management, more or less at all. I can't figure out what was going to happen. I can say, I can either say I was going to run this exec or I wasn't. I can't say that exec was going to succeed. And so that's a problem. And you can say, well, I have like these unless, or I have these only if parameters that I can confine this with. But then you start to think about it, and all it does if you run no-op mode is tell you, I would have ran this command. I don't know if it would work. Another thing, downside of CM is serving out files is generally slow with configuration management. And again, Puppet is an example of this. It's slow to serve files in Puppet. It is also slow to serve files in other tools. It's because Puppet was not designed from the ground up to be a file server. There's tools like rsync that are amazing at syncing files and figuring out what's the right thing to do. Puppet is not one of them. So if you're going to serve out large numbers of files, you'd want to optimize the file server in probably different ways than what Puppet has done right now. Another downside is queryability. While you have extensive reports, finding the information you actually care about in a Puppet report or in a configuration management report of any type can be difficult. You can't just run, you know, like an RPM-Q, show me this. Sometimes you can do a Puppet resource with a name, and it gives you kind of the same thing, but if you want to see things in a more holistic approach, which is what I've been telling you is awesome about CM for the last 4 minutes, you can't really do that so well. Another downside of configuration management is the lack of third-party integration. I can go buy probably 50 tools that can talk to a Linux box and tell me about the packages installed there. I can go buy probably about 3 that can go look at my configuration management system and tell me what's going on. And that's improving. 3 is probably better than it was a year ago. You know, there are efforts to integrate with tools like Puppet and tell you, well, because you're managing it this way, here's how your system's going to look, or here's how, and you know, some people really care about third-party integrations, some people don't. I do, I guess, because of my background before Puppet. I worked in big data centers where we had to know a lot, and sometimes we were mandated to buy a certain tool to figure out what was going on. And I could rant about that for a while, but I won't right now. So if you're doing everything in configuration management, you end up with a lot of code, a lot of CM code. We've done audits where people have 50,000 lines of Puppet code. 50,000 lines of Puppet code, like, that's a lot. And that's after you take out lines that only have a squiggle brace and white space and comments. That's 50,000 lines of real code. And people that do that, you know, sometimes they have, I didn't step on you, did I? No. Okay. Sometimes they have really good reasons for doing it. Sometimes they did a thing where they just ran Puppet resource and they outputted every package on the system and decided that that was the right thing to hard code into a manifest. And you can do that. I don't recommend it. Another downside of a CM tool is how do you get the CM tool on the box? I could package it, but then it's not set up the way I want to. I need a CM tool to set it up. I could use my CM tool, but I don't have a CM tool. So there's a bootstrapping problem. And this is a problem that I deal with every day. And if you've done enough of this with all of these execs and all these files, you have 50,000 lines of Puppet code that are pulling down source code, they're running make, they're getting things set up because you don't do package management. Congratulations, you've created yourself a distribution. It's roughly Gen 2. So let's talk about the problem again. You've heard like upsides and downsides of packaging and on CM. What are the goals to automation? Time to value is the one that everybody thinks about. It's faster, it's faster, it's faster. I need to be fast. I'm going to deploy in 1.3 seconds. I'm going to deploy 35 times a day. I'm going to deploy 35 times in the next 5 minutes. You know, we've heard a lot of talks like that at PuppetConf. Some people want to brag about how fast I deploy. Okay, cool, do it. I am much more concerned about consistency. When I managed a team of 30 sysadmins, I hated it when I could log into a box and tell you exactly who built it. And most of the time I could do that. You know, you could log in and I'd be like, oh, this guy named this folder this way. And so that's why I like automation, consistency. A lot of times I didn't care. If it took 2 hours to do something, that could have taken 2 minutes, as long as it was done the same way every single time. So I was at the bar with a guy named James White, and he is one of my very, very close friends and one of the best system administrators I've ever known. And he's really loud, really annoying. He's kind of a dick. But he has this thing called the James White Manifesto, which I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it. It was big in the DevOps days in Belgium in 2009, and there's a link at the end. And I do recommend you reading it. It's all about like how you should pick out your infrastructure and all this. And so we were yelling at each other in IRC, and I was like, so I'm giving this talk on configuration versus packaging. He's like, well, this is simple. And I was like, go on, James. And he says, well, can you manage it with a package? And I was like, most of the time. And he's like, well, when it's not easy, what do you do? I was like, well, I manage it with Puppet. He's like, well, what if that doesn't work? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, you shell out. You call an exec. I was like, okay. And I was like, what if that doesn't work? He goes, you go to the bar, duh! So, after you have admitted defeat, you head to the bar. Once you go to the bar, you have 1 beers. For large values of 1, small values of 1, depending on what your day was like. Now, are you too drunk to stay at the bar? If the answer is yes, you move on and you get delicious tacos, because after a good night of drinking, I know that's what you need. Then you are full and you have so much food and you go home, only to repeat the process the next day where you were like, okay, I did not solve this problem with packaging, configuration management, or shelling out. And you think, there's got to be a solution somewhere in here. And there is. You need to learn more. So you end up with a foil ball. I just paused for a second for fun. No 2 foil balls are ever the same. You can take a sheet of tin foil and I can crush it down to a foil ball. You can take one and crush it down to a foil ball. And they're going to look roughly the same. They're round. They've got some wrinkles on it. But you know, outside of that, if you're going to look at them at any level beyond that, they're not at all the same. You could also say your servers aren't special. They shouldn't be snowflakes. It's a similar, you know, it's a similar allegory for your systems. Then you start thinking about the foil ball, recovery, consistency, going to the bar and getting tacos. You know, you start thinking about this. What I really care about is the data. How do I fix my systems? Well, we're going to drop some science on you. So, math. You start thinking about, all right, I need the data, I have the recovery, I have these requirements, I have an MTTR I have to meet, I have an MTBF I have to think about, and it really comes down to this really advanced math problem, right? Package software minus config management stuff plus data. What's not managed is orphaned content. I can't reproduce it. And that was really my goal of automation to start with, was I have to be able to reproduce it because servers are going to fail. I know this because I have failed many, many servers. So, with orphaned content, why you know recover. This is why I asked about backups earlier on. This is why I asked about DR plans. What you actually care about is the data, the systems, package, balance, CM. So, what if you automate correctly? You use CM and packaging. When do you do what? Well, when do you package? When you want to deliver code. We need to want to deliver static content. It's the same payload for all your systems. Yeah, many, I like all. Baseline functionality, things like I'm going to deliver the NTP server I need. I'm going to deliver, the version of the libs I compile everything else against. Things like that. Containers and app servers are sometimes really good to package up. Sometimes they're a big pain in the butt too. But when you package things, I guess I look at packaging things in 3 ways. I can package it for myself, include my site-specific info, and it really doesn't have to be a very good package. It has to be able to install on my systems with my assumptions. I can package it loosely for others, and that's like, hey, I put this package up, you guys can check it out. If it works for you, cool. If it doesn't, let me know, I'll try and fix it if I care. No, I'm not going to make it run on Lucid. It's too old at this point. I'm only on Precise now. It's cool. And that happens. There's a lot of packaging, especially like when it's a brand new tool and you want to play with it. Like you go see, oh, there's a Sensu package that was built last night by this dude, and it installs an opt, and you're like, oh, play with it for a while and see how it goes. And it's okay. It's good. It's good for prototyping. And then you can get into distro, and this is where I spend a lot of my time packaging. And at Puppet Labs, we try and comply with as many distro guidelines as we can. We try and make it feel like when you install Puppet from us, it feels like a distro package. We just can't always get a distro to adopt the version numbers as fast as we release them, and they have their policies and we understand it. Yeah, distro guidelines. This is a sidebar, but as you're reading them, just make sure that after every 3rd or 4th sentence, it's because they hate you. So things must be laid out and blah, 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 because they hate you. And this is especially bad with like when you're packaging an application, something that expects everything to be in one app root, and then they're like, well, for FHS, logs have to be in var log, and this has to be in etc. And yes, it's because they hate you. So good for configuration management. Complex dependencies, templated files, which is an advantage that I really didn't talk about too much earlier, but substituting variables, getting templates, amazing. Service management, I'm trying to speed up because I'm more short on time, sorry. Customized content, and then business differentiators. The things that actually make that server. What makes it special, or what makes that desktop amazing. This all applies to desktops too, I guess. But what makes it special? What makes that, what was the reason you needed that server? And that's the business differentiator on top. And it could be, I'm just going to deploy this war file, and that's the special thing about it. So what's left? Things like user data, local changes, and application data. I really hope you're taking care of user data and application data. I really hope you don't have local changes. At Puppet Labs, our ops guys consider it a bug if they have to log into production. They have to wear, seriously, a ridiculously large pink sombrero if they log into production, so that everybody in the company, as they walk by, is like, something's going wrong over there. That dude's wearing a pink sombrero and logging into production as root to fix something. That's a bug. And we usually fix it. We write some new Puppet code. We write a new test, whatever it was that didn't go right. So I don't like local changes. You shouldn't either. If you do local changes where you have scripts you push out, you should make sure they happen in one area so that you can back them up or version them or whatever it is so that you can recover. Logs? I hope you centralize those. So, there was this talk like an hour ago. But backups still play a role. And I guess this is one of the things that like the sexy DevOps people don't talk about a lot is backups are super important. Your data is more important than your deployment time. Data matters. And this isn't like the whole big data spiel either. This is like, seriously, your data matters. And so recovery matters. Recovery may involve backups. You can architect around that type of recovery. If backups aren't the right thing or restores aren't the right thing, you can go HA, you can go fault tolerant, you can do load balance. I mean, like, you can do a lot of things to get your data, but those are the things you have to do. All right, I'll work it.
You got 5 questions.
All right, okay. So after having this discussion again, still with the same person at the same bar, or on the same IRC channel actually in this case, I tried to simplify the flowchart. I decided that you didn't have to go to the bar to manage systems, but I still recommend it. Can you manage it with a package? That's my first choice. Then apply CM around the packages. So install packaging, configure CM, and then What do your backups look like? It really, really matters that you can do restores. And actually, no one in the world has ever asked for backups. They only ask for restores. So, but if you've done all these things, congratulations, you can create a consistent system. And that's what matters. So for further reading about packaging, obviously I didn't get into any details about how we package and what's the detail. I am happy to talk about it all day long, but the first thing I'm going to do right after this talk is go buy a beer downstairs, because I shipped Puppet 3 today, and it was, surprise, Puppet 3! So, yeah. So there are some links here. These slides will be available online and all that, but I do have 5 minutes for questions, apparently, so I did time this pretty well.
Yes, I do have a question. So when you talk about packages, it seems like you're explicitly talking about operating system packages, but there are different forms of packaging available, right?
You're right. I had a slide on that. That must have fallen apart. Oh, that might have been one of the images, one of the slides that didn't show.
Right. So I guess my question is, like, when does it even, like, taking a step back, when do you have to make a choice whether to make something available as a system package, you know, as a Maven, you know, managed package, as a Ruby gem? Because, you know, let's face it, these are all forms of packaging.
Yep, they are. They absolutely are. And my recommendation is get them down to your native OS package. Wrap it if you have to. That's partially because I'm a distro packaging guy. Yeah, FPM can do a pretty damn good job at that. When it comes to things like jars and wars, if that's the purpose of the server, is to serve out that, I usually don't package that as much. That's more of a deployment activity for the app. But it's a balance. In general, if you're going to ask me, like, for a hard rule, package it. Just package it down to OS. But there are some kinds that I don't. When I'm prototyping, I don't always either, just because I want to know if I want to use these 55 gems before I figure out how to package them. So, yeah.
What have you did for dealing with configuration management of objects in the database? So users, roles, all the things and all that.
I can tell you, I often start with execs and get mad at myself. So, like, I'll prototype it a little bit with an exec, and then you can get down to writing types and providers in Puppet. They're not super difficult, but they're not cake. The documentation around that area is not super. It will get better. That's actually what some of the things our doc team is working on right now. And so you can start to model things. The other thing is, like, you can go find a type and provider that does something similar and work with it and kind of copy paste templating stuff. There are some modules on our Forge that, like, if you're doing MySQL, you can absolutely model users and databases and I guess permissions and what do you want SSL on the connections and all that. Like, that's totally modelable in Puppet today. You know, it's not in the core. You have to go get the MySQL module, but you can absolutely do that. You know, also for Postgres, that's available. I don't know that I've seen one for Oracle because I think most of us just don't want to use Oracle anymore. But it doesn't mean that I mean, we would love to have a module that was awesome at Oracle. It's just, we haven't sat down to write it.
Is that what you're doing for the PuppetDB Postgres?
Yep. PuppetDB does that. It models Postgres under the hood, and it says, okay, I want a Postgres user. It looks like this, and I need permissions to be this. And I helped write part of that. So, yeah, it was okay. And that uses defined types in a lot of cases instead of a type and provider at a formal system, because defined types work just as well in a lot of cases. Anything else? Thank you guys for listening. If you had, you know, questions about how we package anything at Puppet Labs, or you want to complain about Yum or apt, or, you know, why isn't OpenSUSE up there, you can come yell at me. Thank you. Thank you.